All right guys, let's start with leaders. So whether I'm using braid or mono, I almost always have a leader tied on. Leaders allow you to adjust basically what the fish is seeing, abrasion resistance, and all of that stuff. So I typically run some sort of a leader on almost anything I'm using for a set line. On this particular rod, I've got 10-pound braid going to a small swivel, and that's going directly to my leader. And I've got about a 2-foot leader of fluorocarbon on here. Now the fluorocarbon I use is anywhere from 4 all the way up to 50-pound fluorocarbon. And the main reason I'm using those heavier fluorocarbons is when I'm fishing in an area where there's pike, because pike can cut your line with their teeth. So if I'm fishing walleyes or more finicky fish like panfish or trout, I'm going to use more like a 6-pound leader or an 8-pound leader fluorocarbon. And you know, I may get a bit off by pike if they're around, but you're going to get more bites on those more finicky fish. Now if I'm in an area where there's a ton of pike and I may have a chance at walleyes, then I'm going to go with a 20-pound fluorocarbon. It's a good all-around choice. It's light enough that other fish like walleyes and bass will still eat it, but it's heavy enough that you're not going to get cut off by most pike. Now in clear water, I'm going to run a longer leader. I may run a leader all the way up to my spool or up above the ice even, depending on where I'm fishing, because I don't want the fish to see that main line, especially on a tip up where you're using heavy Dacron. I'll run like a 6 or 8 foot leader sometimes. If I'm fishing in dirtier water or stained water, I don't have to worry about it as much. You know, an 18 to 24 inch leader is plenty, and in most cases that will do the job and fish will still bite. But in those finicky clear water situations, I like to go with a little bit longer leader. Now as far as a sinker, you know, I typically run like a BB size or maybe a size up from BB split shot, just to help that minnow get down and hold it in place. It's still enough for the minnow to be able to swim around with the sinker and kind of tow it around. It's not going to anchor it in place most of the time, but it is going to help you set that line and get the minnow down. So that's pretty much my setup. Now let's get into hooks a little bit. Most people, when they're setting up tip ups and set lines, they use far too big of terminal tackle, hooks, swivels, all of it. So I'm using like size 14, 12, 10 trebles most of the time. I'm not using those big giant shark hooks like we used to use when I was a kid. You don't need big hooks, and as a matter of fact, they're a detriment, because when you get a fish that eats the bait and has a giant treble hook in its mouth, it takes much more force to set that hook, and you're going to hook them deep most likely, because that hook's just going to lodge right where it's at in the back of their mouth. When you're using a smaller treble, it'll pull out their mouth and hook on the corner or the edge more often. And same with an octopus hook. Like on those automatic hook sighting devices, if I use a number 6 or number 4 octopus hook, most of the time when it snaps, it's going to pull right to the corner of the fish's mouth, and even if it's pike, it's not going to get its teeth on the line, and it's not going to be gut hooked. So smaller hook, lighter line, smaller swivels, smaller sinkers, go smaller on your terminal tackle, and I promise you're going to have more bites. So I like to use treble hooks most of the time when I'm fishing set lines, except for automatic hook setting devices. I really prefer an octopus hook, just because it takes less force to set that hook. A treble hook's very simple. You just put one treble hook just under the dorsal fin. You don't want to go too deep, because if you go too deep, you're going to backbone the fish, the minnow, and it'll paralyze them, so they're not able to swim properly. So just under the skin with one of those treble hooks, just under the dorsal fin. It's a good tough spot to hook them. Now when you're using a single hook, you always want to hook the minnow from back to front, never from side to side, because when you hook that minnow from side to side, that hook can swing down when a fish eats it, and it can jam in the minnow and not hook the fish. When you hook it front to back and let that hook point backwards, the fish eats it, that hook is in place to set the hook on the fish and hook them right in the top of the mouth. So that's the key to hooking minnows when you're using set lines. Number 1, always in the back. Number 2, if you're using a single hook, back to front, parallel with the minnow. When you want the minnow to swim around as much as possible, that's another reason to use a single hook. It's less weight. So when I'm fishing trout and salmon, of any kind, I almost always use an octopus hook because I want that minnow swimming away as fast as possible so that trout or salmon or whitefish can chase it down and catch it. And I also use a longer leader between my sinker and the minnow so it has more of an area to swim around. And that's one way you can adjust your action on your bait. The closer you slide that sinker to the hook, the less that minnow has of a radius to swim. So when the fish are negative, you want to move that sinker closer to the bait. And when they're more positive and they want to chase the bait, you want to slide it up and away to let that minnow have a little bit more free rein and swim around more. Now when I'm fishing with a camera, I oftentimes put that sinker really close to the bait so that it doesn't swim out of the frame of my camera and I can see it at all times. If you guys are getting any value out of this video, I would really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I've got lots more videos like this one and lots more coming, so thanks, I really appreciate it. And also, please purchase any products in this video that are linked below through those links because it really helps out the channel. And thanks again, guys. Now there are a few things that you can add to your tackle and your presentation to kind of change it up, make it look a little bit different. Things like lighted hooks, feathered trebles, you know, bladed trebles, flicker blades, that kind of thing. One of the favorites is actually this Fish Daddy Dirty Bomb spoon, and a lot of guys are using this on their set lines. It's a little flashing light, and sometimes they'll set it, you know, 8 inches above the bait. I know Keith Cavaius has been doing that up on Red Lake. Put a little dropper on it, and that works really, really well in dirty and stained water, especially. Kind of attracts the fish to that bait and then brings them into that minnow. You can put a feathered treble on there, give it a little wispy action. These are the Clam feathered gaff trebles. They work really well. The VMC bladed hybrids, that gives it a little flicker off the side of the minnow, or you can put a flicker blade up the line. And in Minnesota, I should mention, when you're using treble hooks, they have to have some sort of blade technically to be a lure, so you're not using too many hooks on that leader. Most of the time, I prefer not to have anything extra around my minnow, but at times it really can make a difference. Thanks for watching. Make sure you sub to the channel for more videos like this one, and we'll catch you later. Get hooked up.